On today's PropTech VC podcast, we have Dominic Collins, who is the co-founder and CEO of Darabase, an AR outdoor media company. Dominic, thank you for coming on the show.
No problem. Nice to be here.
Why don't you give us a very quick background of your very interesting career? We've talked about this offline, and explain to us quickly what Darabase does as well.
Okay, so I spent, I suppose, most of my career working in large organizations, helping them be more digital once kind of digital existed. So kind of way back when, in the 90s, I worked for Hearst and kind of worked in magazines. I used to run a Squire magazine in the UK, and then joined a startup, an Italian startup called Buongiorno, which was an email and wireless marketing company. Then kind of went back into large organizations, ran the digital team at Sky, it's kind of large satellite TV broadcaster in the UK, and worked with, was hired by Apax, the private equity company, to do the digital transformation of Auto Trader in the UK, kind of really taking that from print to digital. Then joined Orange, or France Telecom, and who'd just done a joint venture with Deutsche Telekom, which is T-Mobile, but over here in Europe. Both France Telecom and Deutsche Telekom had kept a bunch of stuff outside of the JV, and I basically ran two other businesses for Orange outside of the joint venture. One was called Orange Digital, which is kind of all the digital bits of Orange that wasn't the telco, and then also Unanimous, which is the company that they'd acquired, which is kind of their global advertising business. And from there, I then moved into kind of the mothership, the joint venture itself, which at the time was called Everything Everywhere, and then was kind of the first new brand in the UK to launch 4G, which became EE, and then was subsequently bought by BT, or British Telecom. And I ran the digital P&L of Orange, T-Mobile, and also EE in that role. And then moved across to be chief marketing officer of a company called Legal & General, which is a kind of big investment management insurance business who were looking to kind of drive some transformation through that organization. And then I kind of got to a period of my career where I kind of felt that I'd kind of surfed this wave of change through all these different organizations, kind of starting in classifieds and kind of ending up on the beachhead of fintech, I suppose. And I thought, actually, where I am kind of personally, where I am professionally, whilst I've spent most of my career kind of helping big companies be more digital, it might be more fun to help digital companies be more big. It's kind of my little kind of personal pivot. And so I was actually out in Silicon Valley. WPP, the advertising agency, do this thing called the West Coast Tour, where they take a bunch of chief marketing officers out to kind of meet Palantir Technologies and Google and kind of, a couple of hours of Jack Dorsey at Twitter and Facebook and so on and so forth.
Because like a roadshow, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, there's $1 billion of ad revenue in the room, from all over the world. And so you kind of get to see the great and the good of Silicon Valley, especially where they have an advertising kind of spectrum of that business. And the very last company that we saw was this company called Jaunt, which is a virtual reality and became an augmented reality company too. Just closed a C round from a bunch of Redpoint, Highland, some big VCs, as well as Disney and Sky and other more strategic investors. And it was the first time I'd put on a virtual reality headset. And I was kind of like, whoa, this is storytelling kind of at a new level. I was really intrigued by it. So long story short, I ended up joining Jaunt. I was kind of their first hire outside of California. I helped to begin with kind of grow the business, kind of turn it from a project, I suppose, into a product a little bit, and help commercialize it both in the States and then set up international. We did a joint venture with China Media Capital and Shanghai Media Group. And then towards the end, I was also president of products and engineering in San Mateo on the West Coast, but always kind of based mostly out of London, which is where my family is. And it was kind of while we were there, and actually we were kind of packaging it up for sale a little bit and ended up selling it to Verizon, that I kind of had the seed for what became Darabase, which was this kind of realization that actually, I believe strongly, as do many others, that increasingly our digital lives will be layered on the physical world. It'll be, whether you call it Web3, Metaverse, maybe we'll kind of dig into that a little bit more later. But the digital content that we see will increasingly be kind of layered on the physical world, and we were starting to see that happening with Snapchat's landmarkers and ads being put on Buckingham Palace and the Flatiron Building and so on. My feeling was, well, look, this is kind of like outdoor media, but just truly digital, not a digital screen, but this is digital content viewed through a lens, today a mobile phone, maybe in the future wearable smart glasses and so on, which we can dig into as well. But actually what's happening at the moment is the property owner isn't at the table. All these kind of digitally native companies are getting all excited about slapping AR, augmented reality content on the world around you, not just on your face, but also, on the place. And yet they weren't engaging with a property company. They didn't have any permission. There was a bunch of kind of regulations and laws that it was contravening. And it kind of felt like the digital equivalent of, graffiti or fly posting, especially where it's commercial and advertising in nature. So we thought we need some kind of AR database of some kind of registry, hence Darabase, is kind of, an AR database. But at its heart, where basically we can kind of register and permissions and digital rights for the physical world, and then start to have a permission-based and brand-safe play, so that actually, if you wanted to monetize an audience with advertising or commercial content within their field of view, you can do that by calling upon the APIs and the registry and database that is our company, and we can enable this permission-based and brand-safe advertising market in this new medium, which I believe will be huge. And is already a multi-billion-dollar industry, and do so in such a way where the property companies are engaged and rewarded. So that's the heart of Darabase. We've been running for just over 3 years now. I'd gladly tell you kind of more about how that's going, but we're seeing a lot of traction, and it's a super interesting space.
Yeah, the timing right now with the whole movement around Web3 and Metaverse is creating a lot of excitement. You've got major brands trying to figure out what they should do. JP Morgan very recently announced a big presence in the Metaverse and released a really interesting white paper actually encouraging all types of businesses to make a play, make a move. There's no downside, in their words, to making a move and experimenting with these emerging platforms. But we tend to think of the Metaverse often as bound to a headset.
Yeah.
And we tend to think of it as virtual. Your belief is that around us, the real world, the physical world, can have an overlay. And AR brought that in some way, because the advent of games like Pokemon Go, or even scanning QR codes, or having filters, allowed you to interact with the digital, or your physical world in a digital realm. And so your view is that what happens when you have property, real estate, and people start messing with that real estate? They start creating digital twins, and they start adding graffiti, and they start adding advertising. What happens? And I guess that's the challenge of solving, right?
Yeah, I think so. Let's maybe pick apart the kind of the physical versus virtual metaverse thing first, because I think it's an interesting distinction, and I'm glad you made it. Which is that there's quite a lot of kind of evangelism around the metaverse, and a lot of people kind of writing, being very purist and quite evangelical around it, saying, there will only be one metaverse. The metaverse is the internet. You cannot have multiple metaverses, and there's certainly a way of thinking that this becomes, Web3 is just an entirely new way of being able to read, write, and interact with, within a digital realm. But kind of being less evangelical about it, I think the way we think about it is that basically it's about immersive and three-dimensional content. It's about content that you kind of very much live within, as well as it kind of being on a flat and two-dimensional screen. I actually think that there's a far bigger opportunity in what we think of as the physical metaverse, as you say, the way that we augment the world around us, than there is in the virtual metaverse, certainly in the kind of short to medium term, in the kind of next 5 to 10 year time frame. Many people, listening to this will have probably seen or read, Ready Player One as an example. This film and book, which I personally love, where people are residing in the oasis, but it's kind of dystopian view because they're doing it because the real world is so horrendous. And I think that there's definitely a place to play in terms of a kind of headset related, fully alternative reality within which you can interact, buy, play, love, enjoy, etc. But actually, I think that, as human beings, what I'm excited about is the fact that, everyone's walking around right now, with their head down, looking at this flat, tiny screen in front of them. This is the way that they're increasingly living their lives. But actually, what I believe is that the physical metaverse allows us to kind of, to be able to look up in the not too distant future, because everyone will have heard that Facebook have already launched Ray-Ban glasses. Apple heavily rumored to be launching something in the next 12 to 18 months. Google obviously had Google Glass some time ago, but a lot of investment going in. And Facebook, or Meta as they're now even known, 20% of their entire engineering workforce, I understand, is now working on virtual reality and augmented reality. So you've got all these very large, companies which are worth more than the FTSE 100 each kind of thing, all betting their future on our future, which is that it will be digital. And I think that there's a huge opportunity from a human perspective to be able to, with controls in a kind of non-dystopian way, start to augment the world around us in a way that is additive, which is entertaining, which is educational, which is useful. And we see the beginnings of that, as you say, Pokemon Go, which some people will think, I remember that was kind of flash in the pan some time ago. Well, made over $1 billion last year still. This is a franchise which is incredibly successful and is painting the world with content. Similarly, Google Maps, if you go into walking directions and you choose live view, instead of just kind of trying to work out where the hell you are and where the button is and kind of, well, is it over there? And it actually just starts, uses a point cloud and visual technology to be able to understand where you are. And then it starts putting arrows on the world around you, just kind of follow the arrows. So there's some really useful and entertaining ways that AR can start to be addressed. We as Darabase work with a lot of property companies and brands to help them to do that too. But absolutely, we believe that especially when it's commercial content, we're not kind of getting into freedom of speech. And, if I want to, a couple of things. One, we believe it has to kind of be persistent in nature. So, if I'm just walking down the street and let's say in the future I'm wearing glasses and in the field of view, comes up some email. Well, that's a little bit like me kind of just checking my email in the train station. It's not contextual to the train station. I just happen to be in that location. So that's kind of fill your boots. It's not. But if there's content there that everyone can see all at the same time, or there's inventory there, even if people are seeing different types of content, that inventory is persistent and is available for multiple users, especially where it's contextual to the location and it's also commercial in nature. Then absolutely there's a bunch of existing regulation and law and the Lanham Act in the States and passing off an IP and contract law and things like the CAP code for advertising in terms of permission-based media that basically already applies to this new medium. And we will see increasingly, new case law that is specific to this new medium as well.